Hello and welcome everybody. I am Forrest the T-Rex. This is...
And I'm Jeff, otherwise known as Joe Bob.
Joe Bob. And today we are on the surface of the moon. You can see the Earth up there. I have tiny arms, I can't really point. But we are going to talk about how to photograph the moon and also edit moon photos. And Jeff's going to do the editing part and I'm going to do the photographing part. So hopefully you guys are sit back and ready to, you're satin back and ready to enjoy this little presentation we've created. So let's talk about photographing the moon. Let me get my hand over here. Let's see if that's the right key. Yep. So the first thing I want to talk about is some of the equipment required in order to photograph the moon. So some of that is you're definitely going to need yourself a long lens or a telescope. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We also want to have a camera, obviously. Hopefully you already have one of those. And then you're going to want a cable release or other way to trigger your device remotely. You're going to want a tripod, thumbs up for that. And you're also going to want an astro tracker, which is an optional accessory that you can do. So what I want to do is talk about these a little bit more in detail. So the first thing is lenses. So when it comes to lenses, you need something long enough to capture the moon. The moon's quite a long way away. So you want to have a good lens that can capture enough detail without having to crop too much. So what I do is I like to recommend 400 millimeters or longer. Anything longer than 400, you're going to be kind of good to go. In fact, here's a useful tool that I recommend using. And I forgot to put this in the description beforehand because I was in a T-Rex costume. But you can definitely write that down. I'll throw it in here afterward. This is a really great tool you can go on and you can basically see in this tool what your lens will produce when you are shooting the moon, how wide or how tight that lens will be. So it's a really useful tool for kind of judging how good your lens will be. I do also want to say if you don't have a 400 millimeter lens, definitely still shoot the moon. I mean, it's a great thing to shoot. It's one of those things that's really going to help out. And even if you don't have a super long lens, you can still get a really usable photo. Now on that topic, I get the question of crop sensor versus full frame. I would say crop sensor 100% of the time is the way to go. The moon is really bright, and so any of the advantage of the lower light capabilities of a full frame sensor are not really going to be shown with lunar photography simply because the moon's so bright. And so what you are going to get is that smaller sensor is going to zoom your lenses in further, which is going to be a super good thing. So definitely recommend crop sensor. Next thing is exposure, which is actually really easy. And if you think about it, what's illuminating the moon? Well, the sun, obviously. And relatively, the sun is the same distance from the Earth as the sun is from the moon. So actually shooting a photo of the moon is just like shooting a photo on the Earth on a bright sunny day. So a lot of times you guys you might have heard of sunny 16 or sunny F16. You can actually use the same rule with the moon, which is super awesome. But we like to open up 2 stops from that, because that makes the moon look nice and white and like we want it to. So we like to teach Moony 8, which is ISO 200, 1/200th of a second at f8. And obviously you can do any adaptation of that you want to, but that's just what I like to remember. So honestly, if you just set your camera to that and go point at the moon, you're gonna get a really good result. If you're hand holding, you might wanna increase that shutter speed a little bit, just increase the ISO the same amount, and you'll be good to go. A couple other things to talk about. The best phases to shoot the moon is actually not when it's full, because when it's full, it's being like blasted head on by the sun, and it's not as exciting. So instead, I'll talk to you, Joe Bob, a little bit about this. Instead, you really want to shoot it when you are just near full or even crescent, because you get those shadows cresting across the little the craters, and it looks really good.
You want that texture.
You want that texture, exactly. Another thing is the lunar eclipses are pretty cool. That's where the moon actually turns orange because the Earth basically blocks most of the light that's headed to the moon. And the light that does make it to the moon is refracting through our atmosphere. And so it turns orange. You can get cool shots like this or like this. You can even do series like that. So that's kind of a cool thing to do with the moon. And then another thing is the moon on the landscape. A lot of people like to get moon plus landscape. And the problem is it's actually really hard to get a well-exposed moon and a well-exposed landscape in the same picture. So what people do instead is they take 2 pictures and then in Photoshop, I don't know if you know anything about Photoshop there, Joe Bob, but I think you do. You can take those 2 images and put them together and get one final exposure that looks really good on the moon and also looks really good on the landscape. So that's definitely an option as well. There's a couple examples of that. So that's kind of a little bit on shooting the moon. Basically, the thing to remember is if you're going to shoot it, it's very bright, brighter than you think it would be. And you also just can remember the f8 1/200th of a second at ISO 200. Jeff now is going to talk about how to edit moon photos.
Thanks, Rex.
Take it away, Rex.
All right, so let's take a look here. I'm going to get this PowerPoint out of the way. Let's go ahead and open up this moon photo. I'm going to go ahead and open this thing right up in Photoshop. Of course, you can do this sort of work in Lightroom as well, or Capture One Pro. But just for fun, let's take a look at the camera raw interface. You'll notice this moon has quite an amber tint to it. I recommend not doing this sort of work with blue blocker sunglasses on. You know, you're going to want to have a little bit more control over your color that way, but I'm an expert, so here we go. Now, in this scenario, I could certainly white balance this right here. Simply, I could hold the Shift key and click on this moon as a neutral source, and it will color balance for me. And you see it looks a little blue now to me. I could, you know, take my temperature back, like so, something like that. And then I can open this image up in Photoshop. Here it comes. There it is. Now, first thing I want to do is I want to isolate that moon. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a magic wand selection of this black background.
And Jeff, why are you selecting the background, not the moon?
The moon has a lot of different tones in it, you'll see. And whereas the space there is really one singular tone. It's just all black. So it's going to be much easier for me to select space here in this scenario, in which case I can also inverse that selection with select inverse. So in some cases in Photoshop, I might be looking to make a selection of my moon, but it's going to be easier for me to make a selection of the space and then inverse that selection, which is just what I did here. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom into the edge of this moon and take another look at this selection. And maybe I'd like to lower my tolerance here a little bit to something like 10. And I would probably look at something, oh, try not to have those things pop up on me. Oops.
Oh no, Windows.
Windows, getting after me there. And maybe I'll look to try to spread some of that selection out a little, like so. Pretty good, pretty good. Let me go ahead and, oh, Windows again. I'm so used to using a Mac here. What's happening? I'm on a PC currently, messing with me. All right, so I have this selection going. I'm going to add to it a little bit, kind of spread this selection out a little bit. That's looking pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and I want to make sure I get this information as well. I'm going to go ahead, oops. Sometimes we make mistakes. Control or Command Z is your best friend when you go to make these sorts of mistakes. I'm going to lower that tolerance, something like 2. Click in this area. Looking to subtract from my selection.
Can I pipe in real quick?
You sure can.
So one thing I want to say for all of you guys out there using Photoshop, I actually always take my left arm and rest it on Control Z on the keyboard, and Jeff's actually doing that right now if you could see his fingers. Because it's one of those keyboard shortcuts you just use like all the time. So make sure you're getting used to that in Photoshop.
Yep, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Get my selection looking a little better. That's looking pretty good now. Okay, let's inverse that. I'm going to throw a layer mask on this fella just to isolate it off of that scene there. Go ahead and get some pure black going here. Good there. All right, now what this allows me to do is I can take this and I can isolate this down. I can come in and grab a curve and make this adjustment here. So what I'm doing here is I'm increasing some of the dark information in the moon, and I'm going to bring my midtones down a bit and bring my highlights up a touch. What I really want is some of this detail that you see in here. Like so. Back it out a bit. You know, you can see before, it's kind of flat looking, but I'm increasing the contrast. If I feel like there's a little bit of color cast, could be my blue blocker shades, I'm just going to check, make sure that's not what's happening here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to use this curve adjustment layer, and I'm going to come into the red channel here, and I'm going to dial some of that down, try to eliminate some of that red cast that's happening. I might go take a look at the blue channel and just make sure that there isn't any yellow that's appearing. There we go, that's looking pretty good. And there we go, we have a nice contrasty image, and it's nice with the layers because now I have the moon separated out. I'm affecting the moon here with this curve adjustment layer, It's all non-destructive here. If I wanted to get back to my original moon photo, I sure could, just like so, my original moon, allowing me some flexibility to apply these adjustments directly to the moon, increasing contrast. My last move here would be to add some sharpening. So I'd come up to the filter menu and I'd choose Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Again, I would probably want to look at this at 100% and take a look at some of this detail. And in this case, I'd probably bring my radius down to something under 2 and bring my amount up maybe close to 80 to 100. I can toggle the preview check on and off, and I can bring about some sharpness in this image. Clicking OK, applying that to that layer, and there we have it, an edited moon photo.
I love that. Also, I should say, you guys, this was a moon photo that I shot through an 800 millimeter. So you could get the same thing with a lot of cropping, but this was through a telescope, which is one reason why it's not super sharp. It took a lot of, telescopes just aren't that great. But that's a darn good looking moon photo right there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that.
Well,
also,
happy Halloween, yeah?
Yeah, happy Halloween. Also, you guys, I should say one other thing you can do is then take that moon and throw it in another scene, which is kind of a cool thing to do. We actually have a video on that, I think. We did one a long time ago.
Yep.
I'll link it down in the description. For those of you who aren't watching this live, I'll link it right afterward. But yeah, happy Halloween, you guys. We hope you are having a fantastic Halloween day. We at RMSP here had quite a fun day. Our staff all dressed up, and you guys should check out our Instagram to get a little behind the scenes of that whole situation. But we hope you guys had a great time. We hope you learned something today. Jeff, anything you want to add?
We've had a great time here on the moon.
Yeah, it's been great. Our lunar lander got us here nice and safe, and yeah.
Took a little while to get here.
We brought up the rock and roller cart, which was nice to have up here on the lunar surface. Good
Indeed.
stuff. Anyway, thank you guys.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
We appreciate it. And we'll catch you in the next one. I'll catch you in the next one because